Thank you. Susan, are we live?
Yep,
All
we
right.
should be.
Ready? So we're going to start with discussion items and the possible referendum in April of 25. Go ahead.
Thank you. So we'll have a little review for those of you, because we have some new faces and probably some new people online. So what we want to make sure is that the communication that we have starts with, we want to do what's right by our community. The reason we're doing these meetings, we want this to be a collaborative venture between our community, school board, staff, all of them, because our community is progressing. And so here are some of the ways we're doing that. We're looking to grow residentially and commercially. So our community is being very progressive right now. And we want to make sure as a school that we're able to keep up with our community. So if we look at Keeler, several years ago, 80 residential lots opened up. We believe about 3/4 of those are already built up. Commercial property, a lot of new buildings out there, bringing in new business and opportunity for businesses to come in and move to Keeler or our area and bring your family with your kids. Looking at Dickeyville, residential, they recently had a subdivision that had 14 lots open up. Commercial, the TID district in Dickeyville, and what the board has done in Dickeyville is amazing. And so we've got one up out there. We've got the Foundry. There's other room, or there's more room for other businesses out there. It's right on 151. It's a great location. So that TID, it's a tax inferred district, which means they're not paying property taxes for about another 8 years, I believe. Once that's done, then they start to pay property taxes. So this is what happened in Verona. And this is how Verona built a $150 million high school, dropping their mill rate 3 cents. Because that TID district opened up. And what that means is, let's say that TID district ends up being worth $300 million of that property. Well, our entire district right now is about $430 million. It's quite possible this TID district will add almost 35-40% of what we're currently valued at. I don't think a lot of people know that. It's been in the newspaper, but like how it affects the school. And what that means, the school doesn't get any more money from that, but what that means is we collect less in taxes from everyone. So this TID district is going to be huge for our community, and it's going to be huge for the school. It doesn't mean more dollars. That's not how it works. It just means everybody's property taxes will go down because there's more rooftops and there's more value that we're pulling and taxing from. So real big. This is a huge thing for anywhere in the state that is doing this. So kudos to Dickeyville. Next one, the city of Cuba City. Recently opened up the plan for 220 residential lots, all that direction, right, kind of behind the school. 220. They're phasing it out. There's phase 1, 2, and 3. There are houses going up already. In phase 1, 220 is a lot of rooftops. And again, the more your community grows, the lower taxes become. And we want people to move into those houses. We want people to bring their families there with their children so we can educate them. And this is why we have to keep up with our progressive communities. And commercially, we have several TID districts in Cuba City. I believe there's 3 or 4 right now and they're at different phases. So they're trying to invite different businesses in as well. So the goal, we want to do this collaboratively. Find a referendum that our community can support. That's what we're here for. We want to do that. That's why we want to hear from people. That's why we're having these meetings. That's why we're having open discussions. That's why we're live streaming it. That's why we're having public comment at all of our meetings. We want to hear what you guys have to say. And the referendum, if we choose to go, will be April 1st, the first Tuesday in April. Outline for tonight. Okay, we'll go through some of these things, but we will have some board action on the things we talked about Monday. It'll be action or not take action on those items. And really all we're saying is we want to put these into the number for the referendum. Let's say we get to a number and the board says, hey, we voted to put all these things back in here, and then next Tuesday, they're like, but that number's too big. We got to shave $200,000 off that number. Okay. These are all guiding towards, we have to have a number to put on the ballot. Okay. So this is still preliminary information. And if we have to shave something off later, we can do that at a different meeting. That's possible. Okay. So we'll take action tonight on those items. We'll talk about recurring and non-recurring. We will be voting next Tuesday on whether it's recurring or non-recurring, if ready. If not, we will Monday. I mean, there's a scenario that I could see on Monday, the 20th, we've got language for a non-recurring and language for a recurring, and then we've got to decide which one we're going to pick. Okay, so I'd like to have it done Tuesday, so I'm not paying the attorneys to write two different questions. Just in case anybody's wondering, we did get just yesterday, got the attorney fee for running the referendum. The civic cost is about $7,000 or $8,000. That's just to run the election. And then to have our attorneys write the actual language was about $3,200, $3,300. So it's about $10,000 every time we go to referendum, in case anybody wants to know what that number is. So we'll talk about that tonight. Cuts to consider. We're really just going to talk about what things did we look at cutting last April that we didn't, so the board knows, because not everybody was on the board, and allow you guys to ask any questions about those things. And then revenue generating ideas, some things we talked about on Monday. So that's our outline for tonight. So if you guys want to turn in your packet, we do have kind of a CISA breakdown. And I am sorry for the small print. I can't read it either. Okay, so just a few things to know. In November, we had in CISA 3, which is comprised of about 30 school districts, 31. We had 15 referenda questions in November. One was a capital, so they're going for some type of building, and that passed. So 1 for 1. We had 5 recurring referendum. 3 of those passed, so it's 60%. We had non-recurring, we had 9 of them, and 4 passed, so that was 44%. That was just last November. If we go back to last April, there were 13 referendum. So we did have 28 questions in that last school year. So last April, if we go back there, 2 of the 4 passed for a capital, so some type of building. Recurring, 4 out of 5 passed, so at 80%. And non-recurring, 2 out of 4 for 50%. And then we went back and looked at the last 5 school years. So 2017-18 through 2022 and 23. 19 of the 26 capital projects passed or referenda, so that's about 73% in that 5-year period. 10 out of 10 recurring passed. So in the 5 years before last school year, 10 out of 10 at 100% for recurring. And non-recurring in that same period from 2017 to 2023, 12 out of 15 passed for non-recurring at about 80%. So those are some of the CISA 3 numbers. I think I've shared the statewide data with you already. But this is from November of 24, where there were a total of 58 non-recurring, 39 passed, 19 failed, and recurring 22 total, and 17 of the 22 passed. That's just some statewide data in case you're wondering how's it going in other areas, either of the state or of CISA 3. So at this time, we'll just open it up. I know you guys have had some time to think about recurring and non-recurring, either any statements or questions that you have. Now is the time for you guys to discuss as a board.
I still haven't decided. The data doesn't really help because it's one way or another. Like it doesn't show like if you run it this way, it works and this way it doesn't. There's no rhyme or reason to it.
If you're looking at the data to give you an answer, it won't. Yeah, those are trends, just in case you're curious, but we've got to try to figure out what's right for us at our district right now. Obviously, you're going to hear from some people who say, yeah, the recurring, having it on there forever is just a little frightening. And some people will say, hey, non-recurring, that's just a Band-Aid. So those are some concerns that you'll have. The advantages to the non-recurring, well, if anything changes in the state budget or with our enrollment or with any of our tax implications, then, okay, we only ran this for 4 or 5 years, so we can make adjustments at year 5. The advantages with the referendum, as Jamie Nutter told you, from the executive director from CISA 3, if we go from 0 to 10, those are all the dollars that we get in this bar that the state covers 4 out of that 10, and then local property taxes cover the other 6. No matter how it adjusts, the total's still 10. With the recurring referendum, it's no longer 10. Now it might be 12. And the bucket's bigger. So that's the advantage of the recurring, is that it goes into your base, and now every year you have that. So there's disadvantages and advantages to both approach.
And we don't have to decide tonight, and
We're not voting on it tonight.
But I again will say, I understand 100% the value in a reoccurring, right? The continuity, the consistency, we don't have to worry about from year to year doing this. If I were to be asked right now in this given moment, what my personal feelings are, what would be best to move toward personally in the state of our district and the imminent need that we are in, I would say non-recurring because of the opportunity to reevaluate that in 3 to 4 to 5 years. And the citizens and the stakeholders know that will be reevaluated in 4 to 5 years. So that's where, my personal, again, opinion is on it. Again, in an ideal world, every district would want reoccurring. Why wouldn't you, right? We're not in the ideal world right now. We're in a state of we need something like now.
And it sounds like Angie's thinking, okay, her vote might be for reoccurring if she's voting at the booth. But she's, as a board member, she's thinking, I want something that's going to pass. And so her take right now, that's from your lens, is
Yes.
I want something that's going to pass. I think the non-recurring has a higher chance of passing. That's what I think I hear you saying.
That's exactly what the state that we're in currently.
We ran one of each
Yep.
last year and they both failed. So again, kind of like Sarah said, my crystal ball doesn't tell me which way we go. So, I guess in essence, whatever the board can agree to take our best shot that we need to do. And so I would support either.
With a non-recurring, I think it's important that we just be honest with everybody that says, if let's say we go for 5 years, we have to come back in 5 years because everything that we're talking about is sustainable. Like none of these are one-time expenses that are going to go away. And some schools are really effective with that. Benton has done that for a long time. They've run several series of 4 to 5 year non-recurring referendum, and their community passes those at a high rate.
Another thought just on my mind is in 4 to 5 years from now, we're going to have a campus that looks very different. So are people going to be more inclined to support that, or say you've already spent all this money and now we have no money again? Again,
I'm trying to
see,
read
looking
into
at
that-
both sides.
that crystal ball and stuff.
So basically, given the fact that we ask for a certain dollar value in April, and that you go, say, 4 years, and you've got inflation, even if it's 2-3%, you're out in that 3rd or 4th year, that dollar that you passed isn't going to go quite as far. So I guess what would it look like in that year in 3 and 4 in terms of, if you had a
Great question.
$1 million referendum, for instance, and you're going to ask for for 250,000 a year,
Mhm.
that 250,000 in year 3 and 4, it might be worth 200 or 150,000.
So we have a slide that has the exact numbers you're looking for, but I don't want to steal your thunder here.
You can steal it.
But let's say we go with a 3%, you want us to use 3% for salary increases. That's around 200,000 additional every year. And then we go 15% for insurance. That's an additional $250,000 per year. So if let's say we go $1 million recurring and everybody's like, oh, that should get them forever. Well, if the state's only allowing us $325 per student, and for us, that comes to about $196,000 a year, that's where they're increasing. That amount doesn't even cover the salary or the fringe. It covers most of one. And then it doesn't count all the other stuff that goes up at 2%. And general maintenance of the building. So those are rough numbers. Heather will give you more exact numbers here, but that's a good question. Let's say we go for 1.1 million every year and everybody's thinking, oh, that's great. That should get us 20 years. No, it doesn't. And that's another reason that maybe the non-recurring, you go for 5 years and we can plan that out for 5 years and this is what we need. But at the end of that 5 years, then we have to look at different numbers.
So in my head, what I'm thinking is, I think you're probably, regardless of whatever you choose, we're going to go to referendum in 5 years again. So my basis of thinking is my core is telling me to go recurring to build that base, because there's no way, I personally don't think, say we do a $700,000 non-recurring, in 5 years, you're going to ask for 1.2 million. And that's a huge jump. And then that's going to be, so if we build it, and then in 5 years, you're asking for 250,000, that's easier to swallow and in smaller pieces to add to that base. I don't think it's out of reality. I think we are going to be going to referendum regularly from here on out because of the state of the economy.
Well, in my old age, and if you looked at the list of referendum that we've ran, that is true.
And I think it's easier to take bites than it is to take a whole meal, to try to take the whole thing at one time. So I personally would say recurring.
And neither of you are wrong with the way you're looking at it. Neither's wrong. We just have to figure out which one's more right.
But I completely understand where Angie's coming from. I think it's more important that we educate the people of those differences. And that's the question. How do we do that so that people understand the differences to whatever we decide, that we have their support this year, but we also have it in 4 to 5 years.
And I think one other factor that I look at that's a slightly, and maybe not in the years past, or maybe it has been slightly different, is I feel like we're just getting different place right now of uncertainty. That's what my biggest concern is, right? We already have the concerns of inflation. We already have the concerns of what does the education department going to look like in 2 to 3 years? Is there going to be an education department in 2 to 3 years, right? I mean, so again, agreeing there's no right or wrong, we have to come to consensus, but there's just so much uncertainty and so much could change in 4 to 5 years, whether it be our enrollment go up, whether it be, like I said, things in the economy change under our new, presidential direction. So I just think that there's a lot of uncertainty already, and people are already concerned, especially those that are on fixed incomes, right? They're already going up a little bit every month, and that $100 every month for them is a lot of money every month. And so, I guess it is. We're in a really, really, really tough.
And the other part that's really hard to explain to everybody is we set the tax rate, right? And that goes off and that goes to different counties. That goes to Grant County, it goes to Lafayette County. And then what we get every year is, oh, well, some people's taxes went down a lot this year, but these one or two municipalities went up, even though we lowered our mill rate. That does mean that everybody that pays less in taxes, because we just set one amount and we say, yep, it's either more or less we taxed last year, or the mill rate's higher or lower last year. But once it goes off to the counties, they separate it. So some people get their tax bill like, oh, I thought it would be neutral. Ours went down a lot. Good for us this year. And then other people are like, this went up 14%. And the referendum didn't even pass. We can't gauge that. That's really hard for people to understand because it just is. If you talk to county clerks, that's just how it is. So it depends on how much that voting municipality, how much the equalized value in that area went up or down, compared to everybody else. And we don't know that until it's all over. So it's hard. You guys might get questions on that, around every December 20th, we get some phone calls wanting people to, and we try to look into it because we try to understand, okay, which community was taxed hard this year? Was it 2 years in a row, or last year they went down 30% and this year it went up 25%? So over 2 years is kind of neutral, but we try to keep an eye on that. And so we're aware of that, but we don't have any control over it.
Other thoughts or questions regarding recurring, non-recurring?
Is there anything that I can bring back for our next meeting on Tuesday that would help?
Did we get any feedback from why it did not pass anywhere?
Well, we didn't have exit polls or anything. So just what you guys heard or what people were willing to tell us.
Right. Okay. I just wondered, if that would give us a rough idea of why it went south.
I guess I would encourage if any of you have insight on any of that too, or what you've been hearing, I'd be curious to hear that at the end of the meeting.
I can't think of anything that I would want, because really, it's going to be a decision. We don't have a crystal ball. We can't. There's so much uncertainty. We are really just going to have to.
Okay. If that changes, if you guys think of anything that would be helpful, I'll try to get it for you. So just let me know. Okay, I'm gonna hand it over to Heather.
So this is a screen that we shared on Monday, and this screen just basically is stating that, as you've heard us say multiple times over and over, 70% of all of our expenses is from salary and from benefits. And what we asked you guys on Monday, what we were asking, and it's something that you guys are going to be there's a motion for what percent do you want me to put into the budget model? You guys had asked anywhere from 1.5% to 3.5%. This might be a little hard to read. You guys do have it in your handout. But the columns going across the top start at 1.5% all the way to 3.5% and every 0.5% in between. And it just is going to show you for the next 5 years the salary costs at each increase and then what the difference is. So as Aaron had mentioned a few minutes ago, if at a 3.5%, if that's what you tell me to put in the budget model, you can see that the increase is over $200,000 every single year. Whatever amount you guys asked me to put in the budget model, that does not mean we're like locked in, because we still have to do collective bargaining every single year with our teachers union. So this just means we're planning for the money's there.
And I'll give you an example. But let's say you say, let's go at 3%. So that doesn't mean that every year, every person's going to get 3%. It means that that's the dollar amount. And so during collective bargaining, because that has all employees, that's certified support staff, admin, they're all in there. But what we would look at is say, okay, nobody's going to get less than this, but we might try to, if the last one would have passed, we had something done that had, here's the salary schedule we could use. Because we do have some teachers who, this is their 4th year here, but when we hire somebody in at the starting salary, they're making the same. And so we want to try to get them some years of experience. So if, let's say we go at 3%, but we say nobody's going to get less than 2% raise, no one will get that. But we're going to try to catch some of those other people up and get them ahead. and develop a salary schedule that we can use hopefully for 5 years. So the collective bargaining meeting, we meet together, we say, yep, we're gonna enact the salary schedule. Everybody's comfortable with that. Good. We sign off and we're done with that. So we're one of the few schools that doesn't have a salary schedule. So that's what Heather was talking about, is it's not locked in at that amount, but we would, if it was 3, like the last one, we had 4% built in there. No one got less than 3, but we had it built out for 5 years so that we got everybody to within 80% of their years of experience on the salary schedule. So we would try to do something similar to that, if that makes sense.
We would like to go back to having a salary schedule. It makes recruiting difficult when we don't have one, because we've been asked multiple times already this year, can I see your salary schedule? And we have to say we don't have one. And they say, what do you mean you don't have one? And I'm like, we don't have one. So
Yep.
It's hard for new people to understand why we don't have one. Are there any questions? I know this is a lot of numbers. Do you guys have any questions on this?
That didn't show up at the end of your bottom of your screen.
Correct. You guys do have
You
that.
have it.
Yep.
Just to, I guess, just the point is that
Kind
If-
of read yours. So
if it was 200,000 wage, it's also 200,000 benefits, correct? Or am I not reading that correctly?
Aaron,
Yeah.
I don't know, did you put it in?
they've got that. We just make-
Oh, yep, you did.
So the benefits that all go into that, health insurance obviously is the main part of that.
So health insurance, dental, yeah, so if you look at this page right here, board that says, salary increases, on the bottom portion of it is where the benefit costs are. The page behind it shows like all the work that went into gathering these numbers here at the bottoms. But some of the benefit, all of the benefits outside of health insurance were budgeted at a 2% increase. And then retirement and FICA is based off of the salary percent increase. So it took some finagling, but down here and add it to the salary to say this is what salary and fringe will cost the district, and I give it here.
All right, thank you.
And again, looking at 2.5%, just because that's in the middle of 1.5 and 3.5, that so the benefit costs in year 1 would be at 2.4. And by year 5, to Julie's point, is each year there's more and more. Just with those modest costs of 2% and 15% for insurance, and everybody's experiencing that insurance. That's not just insured people. Goes from 2.4 next year to 3.6 5 years later, just in benefit costs. Okay, the next thing we'll talk about are just items that the board looked at and did not choose to make budget cuts in last time. Okay, so these are some of those things. And if you have questions or comments or want to justify any of those things, feel free. We'll start off with athletic equipment and uniforms. The board looked at that and we looked at how much we had spent and how much we had spent over the last few years and what we would be cutting. And for $6,000, we didn't, the board didn't act on that. A couple positions here that were vacant at the time. Elementary school principal, this was after Troy had a vacancy. So we had that. It was something that we talked about. Do we absorb that? Buildings and grounds director at that time, this is when we had a vacancy in that position. Do we absorb that somehow? These are things that we considered. Cuba City Music Department consolidation, going from 3 FTEs down to 2 FTEs was something they considered and did not take advantage of. And for the numbers here, anytime we talk about a teacher position or 1 FTE, we just use 85,000. If we're talking about a support position, we use 55,000. So we're not talking about people. We're talking about just general positions. If you're wondering why we use those numbers and not specific ones. Library and media specialist reduction represents going from 2 FTEs to 1, 85,000 there as well. And para educator hour reduction, There were two different options here. One was just saying all non-essential para educators. When I say essential, that means they're directly tied to an IEP. We would get rid of those positions. Or would we lower the hourly to get them to below 30 hours, which means that they do not qualify for health insurance? Those were the two options, and neither the board wanted to go through. So we've got about 3 pages of these. Are there any questions on any of these items on page number 1 that you guys want to discuss? Because again, let's say that you guys say, you know what, let's look at this one. That's going to help inform us what number to use. So if it's not something that we want to add in here, and remember, we already talked about, there's probably no good ones up here. And for those of you who have some post-traumatic stress disorder from last April when we went through this, I apologize, but we do have a couple of new board members. I want to make sure that they have all the information that they need to. No questions? If one comes up later, just let me know, we'll go back. On to page 2, fitness center staff reduction. This would include the fitness center director, supervisors, and remember, this is a mix of Fund 10 and Fund 80. So about 25% of the fitness center director comes from Fund 80, which is separate from Fund 10, and we're talking about mostly Fund 10 items. Then we looked at CTE reductions of 1 teacher. These are 1-person departments in business, ag, tech ed, family and consumer education. All of those were 1 full-time teacher, and none of the, with full schedules, we looked at the student load, how many classes they teach, what would that do to the schedule for all of those, and that was something that quickly came off the list. And then discontinuing district cell phone usage of $3,300 for all the district cell phones.
This is not anything to consider, but just a curiosity. Is that reviewed every year though, like courses that are offered, and if there's not the enrollment, like you have 2 students maybe, are those discussions with the administration on a regular basis? Like, are we marketing this class enough to fill it, or, you know, what do we do at this point? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Really the ones that we have to talk about is, okay, it's a really advanced class. We know that's not going to have a lot of numbers, but at what point do we run that or not run that? In which case do we, you know, so those are, at what number do we cut it off for this class? It's mostly with the advanced placement classes or those upper ones.
Okay, so everything else pretty much stays
Yeah.
full, you know, relatively full.
Yep.
Currently, it's more of an issue of being able to fit the bodies into a classroom.
Any questions about page 2? Anything on here? Hearing none, we'll go on to page 3. Required event workers would save about $6,400. That would just take a day or 2 out of the professional calendar for teachers, professional development day, and ask they work events that we generally pay for, like $30 to work this event for ticket taking or something like that. Art program consolidation, again, moving from 2 FTEs to 1 FTE, which they did have a number of years ago, and then they brought back 2 after doing that for a while. Custodial consolidation, this was something that we considered at that time, moving just to have 1 daytime and 1 evening custodian. Right now we have 1 daytime and 2 PM custodians, and we're already noticing a difference in the overall cleanliness. 4K consolidation. This, one of the considerations we looked at was just not having our community-based daycare in Dickeyville and sticking with 2 FTEs at the Cuba City Elementary School. Right now we have 4 FTEs at 4K. It's also our largest class by quite a bit at the elementary level with over 60 kids in it. At-risk coordinator position was something that we also talked about for 1 full-time teacher as well. This is for somebody to work with some of our students who are struggling but don't have a learning disability and could use some assistance. Any questions on any of those items? Okay, hearing none, if we have any that come up later, certainly feel free to, we can go back to those. So on Monday, we talked about a few different things, and we said we get you some numbers and some things to talk about on Wednesday. So Cuban Care changes. We came up with two options administratively. One is the charge for Cuban Care, and that would bring in about $1,700 in revenue. The other one is just eliminate that and not staff it, which would save the district $5,500. So this does mean that some parents are gonna have to try to find daycare, and just so everybody knows, we are considered a daycare desert, correct? We don't have enough daycare. So we knew that when we went with the early release Fridays, and we wanted to do that for our parents, but that is a service that we provide that we're paying for. So that's an option, or those are two options we could use for Cuban Care changes. Increase all student fees. Since I've been here 8 years, the board has not had interest in raising student fees. We try not to pass on these burdens on to parents. If we doubled all the student fees, that would result in $6,500 or $65,000 in added revenue. If that's just looking at, okay, if it's $100 per kid, we double that to 200, and that's where that ends up being. Reevaluate alternate placements. That's something that we do all the time. Those are generally special ed students with IEPs. We look at those things and we generally try to find what's the best for the student and what is the general cost. And we try to do what's best for the student within a normal cost. So we can't talk specifics about different types of students, but know that that's something that administratively we spend a lot of time on. Change to the school week. Some schools have gone to Monday through Thursday. We came up with a mock schedule for that, starting at 8 o'clock and getting done at 4:50. You heard all the teachers back there. Remember, like we do educate kids, and that's a long time to be in a school for students and staff. Again, we looked into that, and some of the schools that do that, Chris, and I remember you read it, what were some of the things that they had noticed? A lot of single family households, so daycare wasn't an issue on Friday. I don't think that's us.
Very, very spread out. So transportation costs were their biggest savings because they were talking like 2-hour bus rides that they were saving on. They did say that it was a decrease, a slight decrease in student achievement with going to the 4-day over a 5-day.
That was one that we just immediately thought, we can't in good faith suggest something that's going to result in lower student achievement either. But we talked about it, so I wanted to bring that up. And then consolidate share positions. This is something that we had this year with Southwestern that had some speech and language needs that they didn't need a full-time person. So they just called and said, hey, could you do this? And we were using an online part for about 40%. And so we thought, hey, we can, if you need 60%, we need 40%, we can work together. And so we've done that. We'll continue to do that when that makes sense. It's hard to project that out because we don't know who's going to leave or where the needs are or what schools we would work with, but that's something that we will look at. We always rather have a person than sending virtual. We always say virtual school is good for a certain percentage of the kids, but we think that percentage is closer to 2 than 15. And then review CISA contract. We went through that administratively this week, and there's a lot of things on there like, well, if we get rid of this chunk, then we lose these 2 services that we have for our kids or for our staff members. So we will continue to look through that every year and go through those. And we've cut quite a bit from that. I think a few years ago that was at 80,000, and this year was at closer to 52 because we didn't need some things, and some years you need more, some you need less. One kid moves in that has some needs that we can't have a teacher on, and that's going to go back up because there's special ed is a large part of the CISA contract. So any specific questions about these? Go ahead, Gary.
The Cuban Care changes, would they fall in the same realm as the 4-day school week, meaning that you might lose kids because of either the charge and or, you know, a lack of, if you eliminated the lack of, you know, the daycare at the end of the school day.
Certainly a possibility, right? I mean, some parents might say if we open enroll and go to Potosi, because we live closer to Potosi, they go to school till 3:30 every day. I mean, that's a possibility.
I mean, I saw an article too, I think Southwestern put in daycare. And I know a family who chooses to send their, I think it's pre-K student to Benton because they do a half day and then they offer the half day childcare.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think that that one I probably couldn't support. I guess the other one question is the student fees. Are ours in line with our peers? Meaning, do we charge 100 and everybody else charges 200 or?
I think a few years ago, we did some crosswalks into that and we were on base, but we have not done that. Probably, it's been at least 4 years probably since we've done that. So we can look at that again.
I mean, if, you know, I guess just our immediate neighbors where somebody might
Right.
open and
Yep.
roll if you, I don't know, changed it significantly.
Yeah.
And when we were checking with the other districts on the fees, it was more looking at like, are they charging, do they have art fees, ag fees, tech ed fees? We didn't check on like, what are their semester / registration fees or activity fees? We didn't check on that, so we can certainly like revisit that.
Thank you. We can have that by Tuesday.
Do we know how many families or students utilize Cuban Care?
We average, we use 20 in the model. Sometimes it's as high as 23.
It was 32 that enrolled at the end of the year, and then it's, yeah,
But on any given week, 20 is kind of the average.
around there.
Between 20 and 25.
And that's students or families?
Students.
Students.
Yeah. So like students can be signed up but not attend every week. So
Okay.
we staff it as if we're gonna have 30 some kids. Because there was one day we didn't staff it that way and it was our largest day at like
Yeah.
27 and our staff were like, I'm like, we got you.
We would have to run it more like a daycare, like, hey, if you sign up for this,
Right.
you're paying for this, you're using
Regardless.
it every Friday, whether you're there or not, you're paying for that.
That's gotta be tricky too. You're staffing it and if you get half the students and we're paying for a staff to be there, it's also.
Right.
Not, and that's kind of another. But it's only $1,700 a year?
Well, because
Would be if that was.
so it is 2 hours for 3 employees, approximately 36 Fridays. So we would make approximately that much money because we have to pay all of their
Minus the
wages.
expenses.
Gotcha. Their benefits, their supplies that are in there. So that's why that number is maybe lower than what you would be anticipating to see.
Currently, that's operating in the red. This would move it barely into the black. And we're not trying to make money on it. We just thought, how can we
Right.
cover
Yeah.
expenses?
Right.
And student fees, I have a question on that too. The students can still have waivers if they qualify? Okay, so if they went to an increase, those that have waivers would still have those.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I just basically looked at what I, in your packet, you're gonna see what has our activity been over the last 5 years. What did I budget this year? And then it also shows year-to-date activity as of the end of December. We received the most of our student fees during our first semester. So I basically just took the budgeted number for this year because it appears to be on track. When you look at the activity, some are a little lower, but again, revenues, we usually are pretty conservative on the budgeting for the revenues. So I just took the $65,800 and I just doubled that number.
So that is a number that you could bring back on Tuesday compared to other school districts, like what are.
Yep. And you can see our student fees are listed at the top. Semester fees, registration fees, what we charge for band, or like I said, for tech ed. When students take those, if they qualify for a waiver, then the students, those fees aren't charged.
So should we just kind of reach out to the schools that we touch borders with?
Yeah, I would say just a little.
Because sometimes we use conference and sometimes we
Yeah.
just use locals.
So not necessarily specifically just
No,
our
I would
orders.
Just local.
Benton, Hazel Green, Potosi, maybe. Middle Point, I mean, just an idea.
Any other questions
Heather?
for these items? All right. The next one is considered cuts if the referendum failed. I left this blank for a couple reasons. It was something that the board had talked about before. What this means is, do we want to say, this is what our students will get if the referendum passes? This is what we will take away if the referendum fails. We've had that conversation before. We had not done that the last 2 times. That's a conversation we can have. We do not need to have that conversation tonight because that's step 2 of the referendum. Step 1 is coming up with a number. Step 2 then is the communication around that. And I think that's a communication piece. The reason I wanted to bring it up tonight though, is we were talking about other things to cut. While it's fresh in your mind, know that we are going to come back to this. Do we want to say it's either this or this, or do we want to just focus on this is what we're doing for our kids? And if it does not fail again, we'll go through what we did last May, this May.
Can you revisit what that dollar amount, if the referendum should fail?
We're showing about a $250,000 deficit right now for next year.
It would have to either come from cuts or cutting into the fund balance.
Correct. And we might know closer to May if the early retirement that we'll be offering might make a big enough dent in that $250,000 that we might say, oh, well, now it's 80. Now maybe we would only have to cut that much for next year. And that may not be positions. That might just be making smaller cuts in 25 different line items than one big one. So just keep that in mind too. All right, so that's just a keep in mind slide. All right, so our next meeting is Tuesday. And we'll have on the agenda to take action on whether it's reoccurring or non-recurring. And we'll talk about dollar amounts. That will be after our action. We'll have a better idea. And then the following Monday is the last special meeting we'll have here. And that could look a few different ways. Maybe we'll have one non-recurring and one recurring. Maybe we'll have, you say, no, we want to go with recurring and I've got 2 different options there for you, or maybe it's just one. So really next Tuesday, we'll decide what that 4th meeting looks like. But that 4th meeting on Monday, the 20th, we do have to approve the language. So after Tuesday's meeting, our legal team will have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to get all that language done. And they may even take Monday. Sometimes it takes a while for us to have that final language ready because we have to send it in Tuesday, January 21st in order to be on the ballot.
And we can only have one line item for this referendum, right? Like
One question?
one question,
Yeah.
right?
We could have 2 questions, but the way we're going is either, we're not, most of the time they'll have an operating and a capital. We're not doing capital, so we would just have one.
That was kind of what I was wondering, and I asked that probably dumb question to the Baird lady and I mean, because it's kind of like, if you ask question A is recurring and B is non-recurring for the same dollar amount, I don't know if would confuse everybody or if you were.
I think it would.
I think it would too, but.
Yeah, I get it. And Jason had a good question at our admin, do we have to run referenda just when there's a general election, or can we have a special election? Because let's say that fails and in November there's not one. But sometimes you see a election in February or August. Those are primaries, and it's years that end with even years. They have primaries for those general elections. We don't have anything in November, so there's not an option. We thought maybe like if we paid for all of it, could we do that? And that's not an option either. We have to wait for
And there's a primary election coming up in February, but the board would have had to have approved it back before Christmas. So you would have had less than a month to approve the new language and just not enough time, right? Not enough time.
All right. Time for action on Monday's item, but before we do that, we will open it up. Do we want to grab the sheet back there? If you guys, anybody wants to go back and sign up, or do we just want to have people raise their hand? It's a small enough group. If everybody had something to say, we have time to do that.
We can do the latter.
So any comments or any? We do have some? Oh, great. Scott, you signed up first?
It's just.
Several of you have asked, and Julie's question is what are we hearing from the community? And I usually have people ask or at least communicate with me for some reason, I don't know why, as to what it is. And what I'm hearing from the community, from people, is that there is a fair number of people, not me, but a fair number of people that feel that because of the amount of issues throughout the entire state, the state's going to make a significant change in funding and fix this problem statewide. I don't feel and have that optimism myself. I think all of you received an email that I sent to Representative Tranel and Representative Markline last year, asking for a meeting one-on-one with them, stating my feelings, and asked them for a meeting, coffee and a donut that I buy, and both of them refused to talk to me and have that meeting, even though I asked for it twice and said it was part of my, feelings that I was due to a taxpayer, but they started finding it. So there's a fair number of people, I think, out there that is scared that, well, what if we go to a referendum and then they significantly change the funding process in 3 years or 5 years, and now we have this referendum that we passed because of that. So I think one thing we have to remember is I've been involved in probably 8 or maybe 10 referendums in Cuba City District. I somehow get stuck in all of these things. And in doing so, one thing that's I hear on this one is there is a huge risk here, folks. I think we all know with a failed referendum back in November, I thought we were probably 2 years behind at that point of needing money. And if we can't go next year, you're looking at a 3-year deficit of those dollars that could financially take us upwards to 5 years behind in our district by the time we get this straightened out. So when I look at risk reward, I have to appreciate the comments of people that think that this tax issue is going to get resolved by the state. And I have zero hope that it's going to come, but they have their right for their opinion. And when you look at the amount of risk that it is, people struggle with change. All of us do. Just as human beings, we struggle with change and commitment, right? And we struggle with long-term commitments. The longer the commitment is, the longer we have struggled with that commitment time, right? I gave an analogy to somebody the other day is I see this a lot like a gym membership. We know we're all supposed to go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week, right? We all know that it does great for body, mind, and soul, but why can't we buy a lifetime gym membership? Because nobody would sign up for it. Even though we know it's right at age 20, 40, and 80, we just wouldn't sign up for a lifetime membership. But we'll sign up for a year to take off the 20 pounds, only to put the gym membership and put 30 pounds off, guilty as charged. All right. But it's hard for us as humans, I think, to struggle and commit to something long-term. And what I'm hearing from the community, it's not my belief, Julie, I agree 1,000% with you. Sign me up for a recurring referendum. Let's get done with this thing, right? But I think what I'm hearing from the community is there's a lot of pride in our district and they want it to be back, but they want to know what they're buying. What are we going to approve for a time period to fix the problem? And let's readdress that problem in a reasonable time, whether it's 4 years or 5 years or whatever you folks unfortunately have to decide upon, which I don't envy you at all in terms of doing so. Whatever that time period is, we'll figure that out in 5 years, but getting a group of people, and I think it's a significant number of them, to commit lifetime to that without knowing the uncertainty of any of us. You could go to a recurring referendum and still go to another referendum in 5 years if they make this situation worse. We're not guaranteeing, and I think we probably assume that we are going to go to a referendum in 5 years. It's just going to be less money, Julie, right, than what it is before. But getting people to commit, I think they're willing to commit from what they're telling me, at least. But why don't we just tell us how much we need in order to get us back to where we were before? And let's fix the problem, and then hopefully the state will solve the problem in 5 years. You know, and I think my feelings behind that is that's not how I feel, but the risk is so high here, folks, if it doesn't pass. You know, I'm a gambler. I mean, I love to gamble. All right. This is too much of a gamble even for me. You know, I think the recurring referendum is just a big gamble for the financial situation that we're in today. So if you're asking me what I prefer, go to a referendum that's recurring, and let's get this done. What I think you have a lot better chance of passing is a non-recurring referendum, and let the community know exactly the problem that we're in. And this is a Band-Aid fix, and we're coming back in 4 years if the state doesn't fix it. But this is what we need now in order to get our schools back to where it was 2 years ago for our cuts. And let's solve the problem in 4 years, and we'll readdress our needs and our situation after that is done. Don't shortcut yourself. Make sure you have enough money in the budget to get us back to where we need to be. But asking people to commit for a lifetime of a number that you can't guarantee is not going to be needed more money in the future, I think is their uncertainty of where they're at. You ask Chuck, you know, why did they vote no? What I heard from people, and believe me, I vote yes for every referendum, and no matter what you put on this ballot, you got 2 votes, my wife and I. All right. I don't know how many more you're going to get, but you got 2. All right. I'm voting yes no matter what. But I think when I talk to people in the community, it was like, we're not voting for something for the rest of our life for those types of dollars. If it's 200,000, that's one thing. When you're asking for 1.5 million or whatever the number is for that long of a time period, that's a huge number for people to try to swallow for the rest of their life based on the immediate needs. Again, those comments are not my feelings. Those are what I'm hearing from the community. And my feeling is you have to listen to the people that are voting out there. And I'm not saying that you can't pass a recurring referendum. Because if you go there, I swear and I hope that it passes. But I think the risk is too much. I don't see a single community member saying, I didn't vote for the non-recurring referendum because I wish it was recurring and I don't want to come back in 5 years. But I see the reverse happening. I see people not voting for a recurring referendum because it's too low. And I think we're missing by only 50 or 60 or 70 votes. And if it's non-recurring, I hope those 40 or 50 or 60 people that voted no because it was referring will jump to our side. And unfortunately, if that happens, your job in 2 years, which is a short time period, is to figure this out again because you know you're coming back. I believe they're not getting it right. And I hope I'm right. But I don't think I am. So my feeling is the safe way to go about this is the non-recurring referendum because that's what your community's telling me. It's not my belief, but I think that's the chance and the risk is too high right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Appreciate it. Anyone else?
I just have a question. So you guys were talking the other day about the boundary and all that stuff, all those businesses that were coming up in Dickeyville. And probably won't see that money until, what, 8 years?
It's a
from now,
year.
you said. So I mean, I don't know if like, I just keep thinking about non-recurring and like, and how you guys are saying that you'd have to go back in 4 years anyway. So then you put like that temporary Band-Aid on it, right? For that. And then in 4 years after that, then when that stuff comes to fruition, then there could be little help with that. Obviously, like you were talking about with the crystal balls and all that, like, it's hard to tell that for sure, but I was just wondering if that was something that, if I'm getting that right, or is that, am I understanding that
You're right.
correctly? Or
One thing to know with TIP district or TIP district, they can always extend it. So like
Okay,
the years are, it's a little, like right now, I think it was either a 10 or 20-year TID or TIF. And I think there's 8 years left on that in Dickeyville. But let's say another company moves in and says, hey, I'll build this if you give us another 2 years, then they get the TID group together and vote whether they want to extend that another few years. So that's where it is now. Some are extended, some aren't. But if it's right for Dickeyville to get this new business to come in and they push it off 4 or 5 more years, then they're going to do that, right?
okay. I was just
Yeah.
curious. I didn't.
Yeah, good question that we have asked and talked about too.
Okay.
Yep.
The foundry, I mean, under what, 26? At point?
Yeah.
Sometime at 26, so you got another year and a half, basically, before they get up and running.
Any other questions from the group? All right, board members, any questions, comments? Anything you want that would be helpful for Tuesday's meeting?
Thank you for everything you provided.
If we were to go for an $800,000 referendum, I'm just throwing a number out there. Do we have to, does it have to be 800,000 every year if you don't use, like, if we determine, or
Good
can you?
question, because Angie's asked us a few
I ask it all the
times.
time.
I think we've talked about it and I can't remember the answer.
Yeah, so let's say we, like the last one was stepped up, so maybe it was, I'm gonna use random numbers to make it easy math. 800,000 the first year, 1 million, then 1.2, 1.4, 1.6. So let's say we structure it that way, non-recurring, but it gets us through 5 years. In year 4, they say, now instead of special ed reimbursement being at 33%, it's gonna jump to 60. I don't think it's gonna, but that would be a big deal for us. Like that would be so we could tax 1.4, but with this big state change, we only need 800,000. So we don't tax for 1.4, we tax for 800,000. So, but that's a really hard sell for people because they're like, well, you're gonna add 4 more programs in there at that time, you know, and well, we don't know what we're gonna be doing at that time. We don't know if that's going to happen, but that's what the board has the option to do, is to say, we're not gonna tax to the highest amount because we don't need to based on the state change in finances.
Whether you do a reoccurring or a non-recurring, you can have the same number or you can tier it or step it. And all of that is going to depend on what you guys vote to have added back in.
Like if we do a non-recurring, like Scott was mentioning, we would probably use numbers like, you know, maybe 8 and then 1, 1.2, 1.4, 1.6. Seeing the numbers that you had, you know, we're not going to do a $450,000 referendum for or non-recurring for 4 years and be done. Like you look at Argyle, a school a third of our size just went with a $700,000 recurring. You know, they're a third of our size, you know, so that's another good reason to look through those seats. That doesn't have trends, but you're like, man, these smaller schools are going for this amount. Platteville went for a lot more than us because they're a bigger school. So, you know, that's the route we would go. If there's a change in the middle of that 5-year cycle, the board can look at that and say, hey, we don't need that. Or maybe we need 1.1 instead of 1.2. Not a big difference, but it's gonna be something.
So that's the case in our recurring now as well?
You can't recurring, you can step it out we've seen some recurring stepped up for 7 years, but then the last year, that 7 years stays on forever. So you can step up for recurring, but eventually it reaches that point. I think 7's the longest I've seen.
Was that question in
For
regards to a
that, well,
step
that, I'm
or,
glad you answered that, but also for the
or
in the
choice?
situation Scott brought up where the government they decide in 2 years that they are gonna really support, can we back it off at that point if it is a recurring at that, you know?
Can't change the dollar amount, you know, 2 years from now that we ask for today. But as Aaron said, we don't have to tax for,
Okay.
you know, if you ask for $1, and you only need 50 cents, that's what you would tax for.
So you would under levy.
Yeah.
In Fund 10, which is, there's multiple funds that make up our total levy, so you would under levy in Fund 10. You don't have to levy the full amount.
And you can do that any year.
Yes. You can't over levy in Fund 10.
We can't go $1 over without,
You
know,
can't go
without
a cent
referendum.
over.
But we can always go.
That's determined at the annual meeting in October, I believe.
It's always I think I've asked that almost.
Yep.
Every time, just to make sure that we can have those discussions. We don't need to use all of that money if we don't need to use it.
Am I
Sammy.
still able to say something?
You bet, Sam, go ahead.
So I started teaching in 2 weeks at Platteville High School. I was actually able to get an internship, so I was approved on their school board, so I started watching their school board meetings a little bit. And I just thought, kind of back a couple of school board meetings ago, talking about like transparency with the community here. That's kind of what I hear to a lot of, they don't know what's being cut, what's being considered. So something that I found really interesting of how Platteville does their school board meetings is they use their board docs and they attach different documents that they're talking about. So like this PowerPoint here today would be attached on that document. So people like listening at home or like through the crowd are able to scroll through to like see it. Cause I mean, we try with our YouTube streams, but it's pretty hard. But just to throw that out there, if you were to go watch Platteville school board meetings or something like that, I just found that to be really nice. Cause like when I was watching it, even like for my agenda for hiring Sammy as an intern, like they had a little document of like, I go to Whitewater and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty good with like transparency and being open to that. Could help see the community members, see what you're considering and stuff like that. So just wanted to throw that.
Thank you. All righty, action items. The first one is action to set the salary and wage increase for the upcoming referendum. And again, this is to create the referendum forecast. So, and at this point, the administration showed us the 1.5 to 3.5 choices or options. And that the most common increase in our CISA 3 was 3%, but it ranged from R0 to 4.3, I believe.
Erin, can I just clarify before we go? So just so I'm understanding in case those that joined, what we're talking about now, we're going to move to, but this is only going to give us the
The
number
number.
that we are anticipating to go to referendum for. This is not locked in.
Yep.
This is not saying this is what's going to happen.
So the
This is just-
motion says that we're gonna take action on the upcoming referendum forecast. So you guys are just telling us what items to put in for dollar amounts. That doesn't mean that we're approving a 3% raise for the next 5 years. That's not what, it's
Don't
just,
get me wrong, I would love to do that.
Yep.
but I want to make sure that we are.
but that's just, we're gonna use that number in our forecasting.
70% of our expenses are salary and fringe. You can see how whatever percentage you give me, this plays a big part.
The biggest.
What,
We're gonna be looking at.
what's the dollar amount that we're going to go for? So that's why this number is so very important because it drives the number that we're going to use for the referendum.
But also important to note that just because if we voted on it 3% today, doesn't mean it's going to be 3% next year either, correct?
Correct. That's the number that we use, and we have to go through the collective bargaining process. And if we choose to do a salary schedule, we would have a range there that wouldn't be more than this or less than this.
So at this time, I guess, if you need a chance to look it over further, but we need to somehow come up with a number here for administration to use to lead to a referendum dollar amount.
Just to clarify again, the actions we're taking tonight are for that referendum forecast. So if I don't want to speak for the board, but I think we'd all love to bring back the positions that were lost last year, but we might come next Tuesday and find, you said you want all of this back, but that number's just too big for our community to swallow. That, again, we're not saying we're bringing back any of those positions.
This is just
Hook,
telling
line, and
us,
sinker.
put it in there, and then on next Tuesday, if you say that's too much, I think we're 200, random number. I think we're 200,000 over what our community's tax threshold is. Siri wants me to repeat that. So we might get to that point. And at that point, the goal is to get to the number. So if we say, okay, here's the number, but we've got to go 200 less than that. At later meetings, we would go back and talk about how we get to that 200, and voting one way or another right now, that just means this week, Heather and Aaron put these in here to give us a number for next week.
Just.
Yep.
Thank you.
Last time, just so you know, in our last referendum, we put in 4%. That's what it was. So these people, if they wanted to look at the screen back, maybe a few slides. Yep. While I'm reviewing that for everybody in the crowd. Starts on the left. Not sure if everybody can see it on the left. It's if all staff members got a 1.5% increase. It's got the starting salary cost up 25, 26, which would be next school year. And then below that, it says the increase. So 1.5% of that would be $85,000. And then year 5, that would have an increase of 91. So it ranges from 85 to 91 over those 5 years. Obviously, 3% is going to be double of 1.5. So now you're looking at those differences of roughly 175 to 196. So those differences.
So if I was looking at just the difference, Heather, between 2.5% and 3%, the wage is about 30,000 more for 3%. And the benefits appear to be only 4,000 more. So we're looking at, say, roughly $35,000 difference between those 2.5% and 3% increases total.
You're looking at 2%.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 34,000 at that,
In the first year,
Yes.
in the first year.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a $34,000 difference between 2.5, 3. Yes.
Would it be helpful, and I don't know if this is possible, to move this one towards the end, knowing if we might take other stuff out that has a fixed,
We can always table.
that has a
Sure.
fixed cost? Like we might say, oh, if we're not bringing back this, then maybe this could be a little,
Sure. Want to come back
Flexible?
to this after the next, the other ones? Because this is the most important one. So if that makes you feel more comfortable, let's do it.
if we can take out, I don't know, X dollars before we get to this, then we might be able to make a better guess.
I like
I
that.
guess the only caveat was, I guess the other night, I somehow got, Monday night, I got the impression we were bringing everything back, but let's do that. Let's table this one and we'll move on
Okay, we'll come
to,
back to it.
to B.
I'm just curious how much you guys are gonna go through this week. Is it possible to bring back a 2.5, a 3, and a 3.5? Is it a spreadsheet that you just plug that number in, or is it
It depends. Yes, I can bring you back 12 different scenarios next Tuesday, if you'd like. It just,
I think if we have all the other ones done,
yeah.
then I think we could probably then we wouldn't need 12. If we had all the other ones
I mean, we
back,
had 12 last time. We
Right.
started
Right.
randomly.
I just.
And I'll have 'em-
I can definitely focus in a little bit more yet tonight and try to arrange some thoughts in my head, but I feel like, I don't know that I'm gonna be able, I still feel I'm gonna wanna see,
The total.
yeah, like just a
How much that
overall
makes
picture
a
of it,
difference.
if it's not. And I know it probably is, so I apologize in advance.
we would just bring the summary page.
So are we moving on to B then?
Okay.
Possible action to include the district share of college and off-site regular education programs in our referendum.
Chris, most of this is in your class. What would your recommendation be? Or most in your school, sorry.
I think it will be beneficial. I mean, again, the college classes, definitely, I would recommend that. The online, I mean, I am torn. I personally don't believe that the online schooling is the best. But the fact is, we are losing students to online or homeschooling because of not offering it. So I think it's a need that's growing.
But as far as, and then the off-site regular ed program, we wouldn't recommend that we bring that back as an option.
And from the other night, do we have the dollar figure that I can look at for each of these items as we go through?
Yes, we could have that.
Right.
Yep.
That covers it. All right. Yes, it's this sheet here. It's entitled 24-25 school district budget cut possibilities.
It's about $30,000.
So this, like this would be, if somebody wanted to take a college course, it would still be a benefit for the family to take it through when they're in high school because it's gonna be cheaper.
It's a lot cheaper to take it in
Yeah.
high school. than
E-
now.
They
Even with.
still have that option,
They still,
right? Yeah.
it's just,
Right
they're
now,
paying.
We still offer the course. And it's about a third of the cost of actually taking it. But the family is paying 100% of the cost.
For the schools.
We used to cover about 50%.
And that's for the dual credit courses.
Correct.
All the other courses we have to pay for per state statute.
That's
The
ECP.
ECCP of the college.
College up.
We don't have a.
We don't have a choice.
Yeah. And that was not cut before.
So no classes were cut from this.
A feeling one way or the other here? Other discussion?
How many students go to virtual instruction?
I think it is, I say about 5.
So we lost $50,000 in state money.
So when somebody
For
open
kids.
rolls out, get $11,000 for a student, we might send 8,500, close to 8,500 away. We still get to keep part of that. So between $2,000 and $3,000, we keep it about between 8,000 and 9,000 goes to those locations. So about $8,000 or $9,000, 8,500 per student that goes out. And there's a few different ones. There's Wisconsin Virtual Academy, Northern Ozaki, and McFarland seem to be the ones that our kids go to.
I mean, if we're losing students and I mean, for having a family member who homeschools kids. I suspect that it's only gonna grow, as Chris said, so I'd be in favor of bringing it back. I mean, if it costs 30,000, but we're losing at least that if we lose students already.
Do we have to staff that with a teacher and?
Yeah, so like, I'll just use Edmentum because that's the one that we have used. So we had kind of thought there's a certain number, once we get to losing so many kids, we would probably say, okay, now's at the time financially where we want to try to hire a virtual teacher. So that person can do all the scheduling, all the organizing, work with the kids and conference with them. But you also need somebody who's licensed in every one of those courses to be a part of that plan. So like we would need somebody with, let's say we hired.
Someone with math, someone with science, someone with.
So we thought, okay, we would need to have probably our curriculum leads do what they call official grading. So they would send them, here's what your student has done. We've graded them this way, but you have to give the official grade. So there's some participation from all those other teachers and those licensed areas.
Would that be one of those things that could be shared with another district?
Yeah, probably.
So if it were to be brought back, we may not necessarily hire a full-time.
Yeah, we would, for this amount, 30,000, we wouldn't be able to hire
Right.
a teacher. But again, we thought, okay, it's about $85,000 for a teacher. So once we get to the point where we're losing that money.
Then
to
you would
virtual,
look at that.
We want to start that because I don't see it going back down. Right now, it's not as high as even like a halftime teacher wouldn't pay for that, but who knows, in 2 years it might.
Yeah.
It's a good idea. If we brought it back, we could explore whether an area school would partner with us on that.
And again, you're not approving the program. You're just telling us, do we add that $30,000 to the number?
There's no other questions or comments. There is a motion here. If no one makes it, it fails. We move on.
Said you've been kind of monitoring if it reaches a point where we're losing so many students, we could in 2 years reevaluate and find a way to do cross job sharing or however you want to call it. For me, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of that big number. I don't know if this is one I would fight for right now to bring back. I would agree with the way to. I don't think so.
Looks like this one.
I'm going to say then I'm not hearing a motion. So we will move on if that's the board's desire.
Okay.
All right, move to C.
Next one, possible action to include technology hardware budget in the upcoming referendum forecast. And this is a high priority item, I think, for all the teachers, all the staff. We're very dependent on our Clear Touch boards. We're very dependent on laptops and Chromebooks and one-to-one devices. So this would be one that I think administratively, we would say this is one that we hopefully we act on.
This was 45,000.
I would actually prefer to see 45,000 plus a percentage that we didn't do in the last year or two, that we lost over the last year and a half because of the budget cuts. So I'd like to propose to bring back 60,000 to make up for some of that technology lost. And I only say that because we have to keep our students and our teachers up to date with the technology requirements for their job. So I don't even know if 60 is the right number, but I feel like we need to do what we lost plus a percentage of.
So what we'll do, 60 would go in the first year and then it would be an increase of 2% each year. Like that. That's how, if it's a 5-year deal, it would be plus 2% every year. So what, if somebody wants to make a motion, they can even put, if you want to put 60 or 65 in that motion, that's how we would do that.
I'll make a motion to reinstate technology hardware budget in the upcoming referendum forecast for, I'm gonna say $65,000.
1 second.
Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes, Poole,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
Item D then is possible action to limit the 4K kindergarten program. And what we're referring to is the $20,000 that Gail Pitson had backed out of the cost of running the 4K program at Country Care. So in essence, we're talking about, adding back in the 20,000 that at this figure.
Yeah, and this is one that, this was Gail's option. She's like, hey, if this would help out, we can do this. Would it be possible to say, look, we'll do that until we pass a referendum, or we can go back to that? And that's what now, our previous board, which had different members, can't ever tell this board what to do. That's not how it works. But I will let you know, the previous board was very appreciative of that and said, yes, when we go to a referendum, that's something that we want to honor. So I wrote the motion wrong, so
Well, yeah,
Megan fixed it. So
I had raised the question of the term limit,
Yeah.
to think include the 4-year-old kindergarten
Include.
program. And pending, unless anybody had other discussion items on that, I'll move to take action to include the 4-year-old kindergarten program in the upcoming referendum forecast as presented.
I'll second.
Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes, Poole,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
E is possible action to include departmental budgets. Those kind of span the entire departments of the board, administration, building and grounds, and all 3 schools. And that dollar amount was
50,000,
60,000,
50,000.
50. All right, thank you.
also includes professional development, some travel for professional development, lodging, and, food while people are on those as well. So that's kind of split between the department budgets and teacher supply budgets also. They're both kind of in there depending on what type of workshop it is. And again, a lot of this is just upkeep, maintenance, just like having things that work when things, basically our rule is, for all these budgets, even though they're limited, if anything stops instruction, we've got to fix it right away. And there's some things that you can limp along with, but if it stops instruction, that's what, like, order it today, get it as soon as we can, so instruction can keep going. And with this back in the budget, that makes that a lot easier.
Questions, comments?
I'll move to take action to reinstate department budget cuts in the upcoming referendum forecast as presented.
Do you want to actually put a dollar amount in here so we have that for future reference, I guess?
Where is that on here?
It's right where your left hand is.
Before I did my.
Yep, it's that page. So when it says as presented, we'd use those numbers, but if you want to have a different number in there, just go ahead and put that in the motion.
But I see teacher supplies at around 56.
That's next, though.
Yes, but I don't see.
Line 5.
Line 5.
Thank you. Thank you. And, I'm using the numbers that were in the presentation from Monday, because these were the numbers.
Okay, why don't you just tell us what's in there, though, and then we'll.
So 50,000.
50,000.
Sarah made a motion, I will second. Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes, Poole,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
F then is possible action to include teacher supply budgets, which was 38,000. So adding that back. And,
As Jason said on Monday, you know what happens if we limit teacher budgets. A lot of our teachers, can't say all, because all means it's no exceptions. The majority of our teachers are going out and spending their own dollars to get the things that they need. And when we don't give a pay raise, that's tougher. So this is one administratively we hope that you guys act on.
Okay, I'll make a motion to move to take action to reinstate teacher supply budgets in the upcoming referendum forecast as presented. I think you said Heather, 38,000.
I'll second.
Joel,
Yes.
Parth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes, Poll,
Yes.
Andrews,
yes.
motion carried.
G is possible action to include curriculum resources and team budget. This would bring back the resource guide that was started 6 years ago, including a curriculum director and curriculum lead teachers. And this is a high priority item for the benefit of our students.
This is $100,000.
Questions, board?
Okay, so this is a question that I've had for several years, just having been part of the curriculum process for a while. Have we looked at, because things are moving to a technology-based curriculum, I'm gonna say, and that so much changes from year to year, to potentially get off of that curriculum schedule as far as textbooks and so on and so forth, and moving to a year-to-year annual basis based on what teachers need for that year? Because I feel like resources and technology change so rapidly that a 7-year contract is a lot to commit to over 7 years. And I just wonder, because, and then new things are developed and so much, so much change happens, that I wonder if we shouldn't be looking at from a different angle on curriculum. And how much have we looked into open educational resources, or how much have we looked into alternative resources? I don't disagree we need a plan. I don't disagree we need a team of curriculum people overseeing, but I question the physical things and that 7-year plan for those things. Should it be more of a part of the teacher budget, the classroom budget, for the things that they need in those classes? Just a thought.
How much is the cost of the items that Julie is referring to?
There's not an answer because K-5 ELA is going to be very different than world languages, computer science, and business at the high school. So we have a set amount that we kind of think, okay, this is about where that goes. Like K-5 is its own, because that's going to be, ELA is going to be the most expensive. And obviously at the elementary school, it's going to be more tactile, hands-on things. At the high school, it's more virtual. Actually, the vendors would like us to go on 5-year. We always kind of have to ask, but the difference between buying a 1-year subscription and a 5-year is considerable. Like we get a much
Yep.
better price.
Well,
if you
maybe a
get 5
5
years.
years is even better than a 7-year. So
Yeah.
I feel like maybe we need to just revisit that whole idea. Because I also think we probably lose money for not using some of the seats that we have when we purchase large amounts.
Yeah, you have to purchase the number of seats that you think it'd be maxed at. And in some years we've got 64 8th graders, and the next year we might have 50. And so we're not using them and we're paying for those. But the 5-year is the better financial decision to do. But we haven't talked about having or at that, but that's not something that we're against at all. If we could do that in 5 years, that would be going. Now that number is going to go up from 100. That's going to be closer to 125 or 130. If you take 2 years off of that at 85, generally, we're talking about $250,000 now, and 2 years out of that.
I guess I would like to consult or have input from the classroom teachers as to if they feel they could go to where they would be best be served. Because I know when I was in the business ed, it made no sense for me to sign up for a 7-year contract because every year new things were coming up and I needed to do the up-to-date thing. that might be the case for some classroom teachers in other areas that they are the experts in their area. So I think we need to really go back to them and ask their questions. Is the 7 year, if the 7 year makes sense for them or a 5 year, okay, work with that, but maybe we need to shift it and it might vary from year to year.
So do we bring back the resource and make that a directive for the director and that team to look at all that?
That's fine.
Yeah. So it
But
sounds
if it
like-
turns out now that we do that, now we need 150,000 a year, that's, we can't, if we go at 100, it's a 7-year deal. Because that's what it's going to cost. If we say we want to shorten that, it's going to be more and then now our number's off. So if, I'm not against that.
We took out 30.
Right.
Can I ask?
I was gonna say, we have some teachers here.
Honestly, does
Yeah.
that make sense? Or would you rather stay on the 7 year schedule? I'm just curious.
I do not like the 7 year schedule. Personally, my curriculum that I buy just is like an online thing, so it just like updates every year too. Personally, for me, I can't speak for my whole department, but.
So do you feel like you could better predict or estimate an annual cost per year versus, I mean, to add,
That came out of my department budget, like
Yeah.
my own budget, it comes out of, so. each
because I
year.
just feel like sometimes we feel like, oh, we have this money, we have to spend it, and it's not maybe even necessary. I see Ellie shaking her head. I'm sorry, maybe.
okay. Yeah.
But am I wrong? Sometimes I feel like we're wasting money some years and we don't have to.
Spend. Because we have to get them by a deadline in order then.
I think it's just food for thought.
Can you explain that? Why do we have extra that we feel like we need this?
Because sometimes you have the, every 7 years, your department comes around and say, this year was for CTE. Well, CTE had $120,000 to spend. Well, if we didn't spend it, we didn't get that money again for 7 years. So in the last cycle, I had said to Heather, I just want to take my portion for that 7 years and allocate it over my classroom budget so that I can choose year to year what is best for my classroom. It worked for me in that position.
It was a small.
Because it was a smaller
it was a
amount,
small
yes.
amount.
Now, do I think it's gonna work across the board? No, I do think there's probably some disciplines that we can estimate every year, but I do think there's some variable amounts that we can maybe get a little more accurate in our spending.
And I think if we're gonna look at the curriculum and the way, I think we have to make sure all departments are being met. Cause I know right now, the intervention department, I think the 95% is the first like branch off of the core intervention they've ever had. Otherwise, they spend their own budget money. So like when I was a math interventionist, my second year, my entire budget went to a curriculum. Then anything I needed that rest of the year came out of my pocket. Making sure it includes everybody.
Yep.
I do think it's a big task, but I think in the long run it would be very beneficial.
So I don't know how we move forward from that
Right.
conversation. I apologize, but I just feel like that's an issue where I think honestly, we could maybe better handle our money.
Is that something, administration, that you can even address between now and our next meeting in terms of how you would move forward rather than just the typical 7 year? I don't think so. I mean, I know nothing about what it is that you're talking about.
No,
So
what I do
it's
think
Greek.
we could do is I do think we could approve an amount and move forward with that. And it might take a year, year and a half, but at least we would be moving forward with an end goal for better.
Right now, we're just taking action on putting
An
them out.
amount.
to put
Yeah.
in. I think philosophically, this then needs to take another layer that takes quite a bit of time. So I'm investigating curriculum and costs and I mean, there's so much when it comes to curriculum. I mean, I love the idea, but I think right now, I think it's in a ballpark
Right, and
figure
I
that we're
agree.
going to start with. Yeah.
So then back to that figure, we have 100,000 that was removed. Do we add something back, and if so, what, or how much?
Now, based on the conversation from Monday, the one thing that had me mostly concerned, I know we're talking, this might shift, is on our current trajectory, we're gonna get further and further behind. And eventually we're going to get, all of a sudden, year 2, we're gonna be sitting at double. If this isn't, we don't get moving forward, asking more because we're now behind on the cycle year after year. So this to me is the high priority piece. I mean.
Moving to 5
forward-
years would help with that though. If
Yeah.
we put 1 year in the first year and 1 year in the second one, and we're condensing everything, then
We wouldn't lose.
we wouldn't lose that. They're gonna get a new 5-year subscription anyway. So that would, just basic napkin math. If it's $80,000 a year that goes towards curriculum, that sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but 80 over 2 years that we would shorten it is 160. So if we divide that by the 5 years that we would put in it would be roughly another $30,000 per year. That's if we kept it dollar for dollar the same. So if you're thinking about making a motion with that, that's just basic napkin math that says that would give us the same thing. But going to a 5-year, it's a lot easier getting a 5-year subscription for things than it is for 7, to be honest.
Absolutely.
I just personally feel next to teacher salaries and our staff, this comes in second as the probably top priority to keep our students and our district moving forward, right? This is what our framework is for our kids, right?
So currently we have a 7-year at 100,000 a year plan. So if we went to a 5-year, it would be 130,000 a year.
So someone could make the motion as written, just with the understanding that we're coming back with a different number next week than you originally anticipated. Which you though?
Julie, do you have a motion?
I'm going to make a motion to include curriculum team and resources for $125,000 in the upcoming referendum forecast.
I'll second it.
Joel,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes. Paul,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
Oh, Gary, sorry to interrupt. I noticed that the professional development for staff was skipped.
Oh,
That was,
I wrote that in there and then at an admin meeting, they're like, professional development usually comes out of department budgets or
Okay.
teacher supply budgets. So I just thought that's already in there. We wanted to make sure that we had PD money in there, but it's actually part of those 2 budgets.
oh,
So that's already part of it.
thanks.
H is possible action to include teacher reimbursement for college credits. And this was something that we had decided years ago that we valued a teacher getting a master's degree. And so that's why that was there.
$6,000 is the amount.
Thank you. Questions, board?
What's the policy to pay back? Is it 50% or is it a certain?
Waterfalls, so it's
It's a tiered
it's
approach.
tiered.
I don't know it off the top of my head. I know that after you take your final class, you then have to stay here for 5 years, I believe. I don't.
Ellie, you recently
Yeah.
got yours, do you remember?
Like, are you talking about for credit?
Like, do we pay 50% of the course or is it up to $600 per course?
I think it's 2 different credits, up to 2 credits per, like,
And you can have 6 credits per year, I believe, or per semester?
3 or 6. I thought it was school year. I thought it was fiscal year. I thought it was- It can change
So it's $200 per credit.
unless otherwise noted by the board. And then anytime the district pays, then they're if they would leave.
So there's a vesting period.
Yep, if they leave the district,
Liquidated damages.
yeah, there's, yep. And we,
Is the 6,000 just what we spent in like the last year we had it?
it was probably less than 6,000. I never know when I, go to budgeting, who's deciding to
Okay.
take classes,
I think we looked at
so
the last 2 years, we're like, oh, we'll use 6 because that's about the average.
it's a small enough number, and again, on expenses, I prefer to be.
I'll move to include the teacher reimbursement for college credits in the upcoming referendum forecast. As presented.
Is there a second?
I will second. Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Linderman, yes. Poole,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
I is possible action to increase staff cash in lieu of insurance.
Yeah, because we didn't have anyone jump from cash in lieu of two-unit family insurance, this made us, or this allow us for, what was it,
It was a
$60,000?
$50,000.
That was our swing. So I would not recommend going back to that, but that's something you guys can talk about. It's still, what is it, 2,000? 2,000 plus 4,000.
Do most districts offer that benefit?
Most would mean more than 50%. No, there are several other in CISA. I think there were 6 other schools in CISA 6 that, or CISA 3 that replied and said that they do some form of that. But most do not.
So do we believe it saved us money then?
It did, because nobody shifted from in lieu of to insurance plan, so it did in the current school year, yes.
About 50,000 savings.
I would make a motion to increase the staff cash in lieu of insurance in the upcoming referendum forecast.
I just want to clarify, Gary,
Yeah.
you're choosing to go back to the,
To bring that back.
That
bring it
motion would take it back from 2 to 4.
or leave it as
Still-
is?
Leave it as
If it's,
is.
if you want to leave
Okay.
as is, we
Then we
don't.
don't
need a
have to
motion.
change anything.
J is possible action to include the high school first shift custodian. This time we've got one daytime custodian between the 3 buildings, I believe. Cost of that was,
55,000, because we're using 55,000 for all support staff
okay,
positions.
and currently I would assume that that is quite a challenge to be in 3 buildings in an 8-hour period. And currently it is a full-time that we have during the day now, correct?
At the elementary, it's full-time.
But there's none at
There's
the high
none.
school or the middle school.
Correct. This campus does not have. We have the building ground director and building ground assistant director, and they're on things. Then everybody
Everybody kinda helps out.
Everybody helps out.
Thank you.
I'll move to take action to reinstate a CCHS first shift custodian in the upcoming referendum forecast as presented.
I'll second.
Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes, Poole,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
Then K is a possible action to include high school administrative assistant. As was explained Monday, Pam is gone and they've shifted the duties to several other people.
So Pam's position is gone, but that workload still remains. And if you follow around our administrative assistants all day, they don't have a lot of free time. I know all of them are pretty booked and so Pam did, anybody who thinks that Pam worked 40 hours a week, it wasn't, it was over 40. Just like all of our administrative assistants.
And the figure for that, Heather, was
55,000.
Yeah, we'll use 55 for all support positions and 85 for all certified.
I'll move to take action to reinstate a CCHS administrative assistant in the upcoming referendum forecast as presented.
I'll second.
Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes, Poole,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
L is possible action to include elementary math intervention position. Whitney spoke Monday about that we used to be able to serve, but now we're not able to now that there is no position. And I guess can you elaborate at all in terms of that position and the need?
So currently, right now, there are 15 students who are unable to be seen by a reading interventionist because Carly Redford took on some math students. So that cut her reading load significantly. So there's 15 students currently at the elementary that cannot receive the support that they need to be successful.
Thank you.
And then Amanda Gall is also our other one. But with our Title I funds and the way money is allocated, she does spend 3 hours a week at St. Rose. So she is not at our building for that. Yeah, so.
It was Act 20.
Yeah, with the increased responsibilities for the building altogether, similar to Pam's position. While it was, the timing worked, I would say if we found out so far this year that getting by without that position was feasible, we would have said, yeah, we can do without, but we see the impact already. We expect to see it in testing numbers probably next year.
So again, knowing that we're putting numbers out there to get a visual, because one of the things that I will come back to, and I'll come back to it again next week. Are we exploring shared positions with other districts? Are we, all of those pieces that will obviously be a significant cost savings when it comes to especially benefit side of the world for full-time positions. But yet still meeting our student. And I know we're talking those conversations, but it's still something I want to make sure that we are still constantly coming back to are we looking at potentially shared for
Those are normal
interventions?
conversations, our PAC meetings where the superintendents get together, like who's got a need for this, or anybody have a part-time this, or anybody have FTEs that they're willing to share. Those are pretty common.
I mean, I know the needs there. I'm just wanting to make sure that we still have a fiscal management piece that we've got to be implement. So
I agree, but I also think we have to be a district if we are looking to expand in our numbers and bring people in and be marketable. We have to be able to provide the support that these students need. So I definitely feel that for me, this would be a non-negotiable. So I am going to move to take action to reinstate a CCES math intervention position.
I will second.
Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes. Poll,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
Item M is possible action to include an elementary special ed teacher.
So if you remember last year, we had one grade level that had small numbers. And we happened to have two regular ed teachers where one of them had a special ed license. And so they came up with we could probably make this work for a year. The next year we'd have, we couldn't because the next year they're gonna have regular numbers again. And they'll have to go to that. And fifth grade doesn't have somebody who's licensed in special ed. So this is something that's a high priority for us because legally we have to be able to have that position. We knew that was a 1 year fix. We knew it wasn't a 2.
So that small class is moving on to fifth grade. We don't have anybody or wouldn't
License
shift or
that can do
flex.
regular ed.
That's 85.
And even the small class now has grown by 6 students. So we're like, ooh, okay.
I'll move to take action to reinstate a CCES special education teacher in the upcoming referendum forecast as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes. Poll,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
We have concluded our agenda.
We have to go back.
I'm sorry.
Do you want to go back to one or do you want us to come up with 3 scenarios for Tuesday that says, I don't know what percentages you guys asked for again, but now that we have these numbers, do you want us to say, okay,
We can just come back and then make a motion on Tuesday to choose one?
Why don't we just make a motion to say that we would like options A, B, and C, for
for Tuesday?
instance, whatever
Have that
those
in
are.
action?
So of those 5, is there one that we can agree to and then try to find a second and a third, or maybe we only come up with 2, for instance?
You said you originally had put in 4%. Erin, is that was
The
what
last November was 4%. Correct?
And the average is usually 3%.
Well, the average the last couple of years has been around 3. Before inflation went so high, it was closer to 2.
Okay.
And we don't know and we can't predict what inflation's going to do.
Yeah. Well,
So yeah, you guys could make a motion that you'd like to bring back options with percentages for blank, blank, and blank, or 2 or 3, and we can have that ready for Tuesday.
If we said we were picking 3, 2, 2.5, and 3?
Yeah.
Or when,
It's a starting point.
I'm just asking. One dropped off and something else stuck in.
and again, this is just me. I wouldn't mind seeing numbers for 3.5. Just.
I was
to-
going between 3 and 3.5.
I just to see.
But I'd rather be conservative in my estimate as well.
Mhm.
And that would be good.
So
I would say 3 and 3.5.
anybody disagree with 3 and 3.5? Hearing nothing, do you want more than those 2 or just those?
I'm of 2 minds about it because I do feel that we have to stay competitive within the CC3 to retain our teachers and show them that we value them and offer a quality education. But reflecting on the fact that we basically want to bring everything back, I'm worried we're not gonna have a feasible number next week. So I almost want to see 2.5 as well. And I'm so sorry.
You're fine.
So much work.
I would agree with that, Megan. I'm thinking of the 2.5.
Yeah.
So
Just to see how much that swings the overall number.
So if I make a motion that says that we will explore the salary and wage increase from 2.5% to 3% to 3.5% for the upcoming referendum forecast, is there a second?
I'll second that. Just a second to take them off my notes, please.
All right, Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinterman, yes, Poole,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
Is there any comments, questions, audience?
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate your attendance.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Thank you, guys.